24 sessions. And well, today we'll do what we were supposed to do yesterday, which is practice question number 4 of the speaking section, right? We're working on question 4, the last question of the speaking section. Does anyone remember how it was like? How question 4 was like?
A topic, and there were 2 topics.
Exactly, there was
involved.
A topic, 2 subtopics, and 2 examples as well, right?
No, right.
Exactly, and it was a lecture that you guys needed to hear. How many seconds do we have to prepare and to speak?
I think
20.
we have like 20 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak, maybe.
20 seconds to prepare, 60 to speak. And yeah, today we're going to be practicing. So please, I'm going to show you the template. Make sure that you have it. You take a screenshot of it or anything, but you need to make sure that you use it for today's practice session. So let me show you the template, just in case you don't have it. Should be somewhere here. Okay, here it is. So please, if you don't mind taking a screenshot to use this template later. Is it done? Do you guys have it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, guys, perfect. So let me stop sharing and share again. For some reason, I can't see you guys. Okay, there we go. So we're gonna start practicing now. Please get ready to take notes. I'm gonna play our first lecture.
Now listen to part of a talk in an economics class.
So, let's talk about money. What is money? Well, typically people think of coins and paper bills as money, but that's using a somewhat narrow definition of the term. A broad definition is this. Money is anything that people can use to make purchases with. Since many things can be used to make purchases, money can have many different forms. Certainly, coins and bills are one form of money. People exchange goods and services for coins or paper bills, and they use this money, these bills, to obtain other goods and services. For example, you might give a taxi driver $5 to purchase a ride in his taxi, and he in turn gives the $5 to a farmer to buy some vegetables. But as I said, coins and bills aren't the only form of money under this broad definition. Some societies make use of a barter system. Basically, in a barter system, people exchange goods and services directly for other goods and services. The taxi driver, for example, might give a ride to a farmer in exchange for some vegetables. Since the vegetables are used to pay for a service, by our broad definition, the vegetables are used in barter as a form of money. Now, as I mentioned, there's also a second, a narrower definition of money. In the United States, only coins and bills are legal tender, meaning that by law, a seller must accept them as payment. The taxi driver must accept coins or bills as payment for a taxi ride, okay? But in the U.S., the taxi driver is not required to accept vegetables in exchange for a ride. So a narrower definition of money might be whatever is legal tender in a society, whatever has to be accepted as payment.
Okay, guys. Now, using points and examples from the talk, explain the 2 definitions of money presented by the professor. And you will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Guys? So, who wants to go first?
Me.
Okay, Sophia. Go ahead, please.
Okay. The lecture discussed two definitions of money. First, the professor explained coins and bills, which is the exchange of a service with coins or bills purchases. And for instance, the teacher gave the example of the service of the taxi driver. When you take a taxi, you pay with coins or bills. Then she goes on to explain what is barter service, which is when you exchange a service. And she gave the example of the taxi who give a ride to exchange of vegetables. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well done. So, great. Content was perfect. You did mention both definitions of money. Maybe don't forget to always be paying attention and try to catch the you don't always have like titles or key concepts, right? But in this case, the two definitions had a name, right? The narrow definition and the broad definition. Try to be paying attention in case a name like that is mentioned. That'd be the only thing maybe that you were missing, but you did explain both correctly. So coins and bills, whatever it is, the legal tender of the country. And the second, anything that can be used to pay for services, right? So it could be another service. And you have both examples of the taxi driver being paid by coins and bills and also by vegetables from the farm. So well done. Maybe another tip would be don't forget your conjugations. In the beginning, the lecture discusses, right? Instead of discuss, a taxi driver who gives a ride, right? Careful with those S or those third person conjugations. Okay, guys. Do you have any questions so far?
Which one was the second topic? I heard bargain, but I don't know if I'm correct.
It's a barter system, right? Where it means like, so you can exchange goods and services, right? Same for barter system. But here, actually, the two subtopics were the two definitions, right? The two ways to define money. The first way was whatever is the legal tender of the country, right? Whatever is accepted by law. So in the United States, for example, only coins and bills are accepted. And then you have the example of the taxi driver. And the second definition of money, way to define money would be anything at all that you can use to pay for a service or for a product, right? And that could be vegetables, that could be coins and bills, or it could be paper, or whatever. Okay, guys. Any other question? Well, in that case, let's do another one.
Why do we do the things we do? What drives us to participate in certain activities, to buy a certain car, or even to choose a certain career? In other words, what motivates us to do what we do? Well, in studies of motivation, psychologists distinguish between two very different types. Our reasons for doing something, our motivations, can be extrinsic. In other words, based on some kind of external reward, like praise or money. Or they can be intrinsic, meaning we engage in the activity because it pleases us internally. Both create strong forces that lead us to behave in certain ways. However, intrinsic motivation is generally considered to be more long-lasting than the other. As I said, extrinsic motivation is external. It's the desire to behave in a certain way in order to obtain some kind of external reward. A child, for example, who regularly does small jobs around the house, does them not because she enjoys taking out the garbage or doing the dishes, but because she knows if she does these things, she'll be given a small amount of money for doing them. But how motivated would the child be to continue doing the work if her parents suddenly stopped giving her money for it? With intrinsic or internal motivation, we want to do something because we enjoy it or get a sense of accomplishment from it. Most people who are internally motivated get pleasure from the activity, so they just feel good about doing it. For example, I go to the gym several times a week. I don't go because I'm training for a marathon or anything. I just enjoy it. I have more energy after I exercise, and I know it's good for my health, so it makes me feel good about myself. And that's what's kept me going there for the past 5 years.
Okay. Now, using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of motivation. Now you guys will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So, anybody else who wants to try?
Can I?
Yeah, sure, Alejandra. Go ahead, please.
The lecture discusses two types of motivation. First, the professor explains extrinsic motivation, which is external. It means that they will receive external award. It can be money or at any time award. In other words, she explains that it's the desire to behave in something in some way in order to receive something. For instance, she uses the example of a child who does a kind of work in order to receive money. Then she goes for the second explanation, that is intrinsic motivation, which is internal. It means that it's just to get pleasure from some kind of activity. For instance, she talks about a kind of activity like going to a gym or doing exercise to feel okay.
Okay, good. Yes, she goes to the gym, right? Because she gets pleasure from the activity. So well done, perfect. Really, I don't have any comments. Maybe one tiny detail. Careful always with the pronouns, right? In this case, the professor, female professor, you were starting good she, but then once you said he, right? So always make sure that you're looking at your nose and it should be there. And maybe one more tip, although in this case you did make it on time, so no problems in that sense. But just in general, if you have more than one definition, it's okay if you just mention one, right? So for example, in this case, for extrinsic motivation, you said, so extrinsic motivation is external when you do something for an external reward, right? And then you said, in other words, it's the desire to behave in a certain way in order to get an external reward, right? I think. So in order to save time and to maybe leave enough space for the examples, you can maybe just mention one of the definitions and try to explain that with the example, right? So you can just say, extrinsic motivation is external, and even leave it there, right? And just say the professor gives the example of a child that is paid to do course, right? So the child does this because she or he wants to get money out of it, something external, right? An external reward. So you can use the example to explain that concept of the desire to behave in a way in order to get a reward, right? I don't know if you know what I mean, but basically, so you can save some time there. Well done, though. Perfect response. Congrats. You guys, let's move on to something else. All right, here.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
We all know that insects like to eat plants. But some plants have been able to develop ways to protect themselves from insects. Today I'm going to talk about some ways plants defend themselves. Now, some plants have physical features that prevent insects from landing on them. Like the passion plant, for example. Its leaves have little spiky hairs all over them. They're like spikes sticking out of the plant that are so numerous and dense that they prevent insects from landing on the leaves. Basically, there's just no room for the insect to land. And since insects can't land on the leaves, they can't eat them. So the little hairs serve as a physical feature that helps protect the passion plant from insects. All right, but other plants protect themselves using chemical defenses, like the potato plant. The potato plant's able to release a chemical throughout its leaf system whenever an insect attacks it, starts eating the leaf. So, say an insect starts eating a potato plant's leaf. That will cause the plant to react by releasing a chemical throughout its leaf system. The insect swallows this chemical as it eats. And this chemical discourages the insect from wanting to eat any more of the plant. How? Well, the substance makes the insect feel full, like it's already had enough to eat. The insect no longer feels hungry, so it stops eating the plant. So, by emitting this chemical, the potato plant protects itself from insects.
Now, using points from the lecture, explain how the passion plant and the potato plant defend themselves from insects. Now you guys will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So, Marco, maybe?
Okay, yeah, Andrea.
Go ahead.
Now?
Yes, please. You can start, Marco.
Okay. The lecture discusses about the ways some plants protect themselves from insects. First, the professor explains about the defensive feature that passion fruit has, which is a physical feature to prevent insects to land on them. They have little spiky hairs over them, so there's no space for the insect to land. Then she explains about the potato way to defend. To illustrate this, she gives the example about the leaf system that the potato has. So the insects, when they eat the leaf, the potato segregates some kind of chemical liquid, and the insect feels plentiful. So he stops eating the potato leaf.
Exactly, great. The insect feels full, right?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Well done. So you got both subtopics, the physical features like the passion plant and its spiky hairs, and the chemical defenses, right? Like the potato plant that releases this chemical that makes the insect feel full and not want to eat in the plant anymore. Well done. You made it on time as well. Your grammar was really good. One tiny comment in the beginning, remember, we don't say discusses about, right? So the lecture discusses how some plants defend themselves from insects.
Okay.
Okay, Marco, well done. Any questions so far? Guys, let's continue then.
Listen to part of a lecture in an economics class.
So when we talk about the demand for a product, we're referring to how much consumers want to buy it, right? And often the demand for a product is influenced by its price. The more expensive it becomes, the less chance that people will want to buy it. Okay, but that's not the whole story. Sometimes the demand for a product can also be influenced by the price of other related products. First, there are those products called substitute goods. If products can be substituted for one another, then they're called substitute goods. They're similar enough to be interchangeable. And an increase in the price of one means an increase in the demand for the other, like butter and margarine. They're pretty much used for the same purposes. Margarine's a butter substitute, and you can bake equally well with either. Well, when the price of butter goes up, it becomes less affordable, and so what do people do? They buy margarine instead, right? So, you see, an increase in the price of butter increases the demand for margarine. Now, another instance where the price of one product can influence the demand of another is when you have two products that can't be used without each other. Those products we call complement goods. They complement or complete each other, if you will, like compact discs and compact disc players. You need both products in order to use either. So if the price of either product increases, demand for both is likely to decrease. And if the price of CDs goes up, well, demand for them will go down, right? And because CDs and CD players complement each other, what will also happen is that the demand for CD players will go down too.
Now, using the points and examples from the talk, explain how substitute goods and complement goods influence demand for a particular product. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys, so maybe Paula?
Okay. There's a demand that can be influenced by the price of the products, and those are called substitute goods. And well, she gives an example about butter, like the butter increases the price, so people instead of buying butter, they buy margarine because it's cheaper. And the other example that she gives about complement goods, it's about CDs that maybe when you need a CD and a CD player, and both are complementing, they are like much higher the price, and it's the demands go low. So maybe that and that.
Okay, Paula, That was awesome. Well done. So I really like the fact that, I mean, even though he didn't stick to the traditional structure first, like the subtopic complement goods, then the definition, right, which are goods that complement each other, and then how it works, and then the example. But in this case, it was much more natural what you did. It was really natural, and you really show that you got the 2 points, right? So you use the examples, you focus more on the examples, and then you explain the concept. And I like that because it was really well explained, it was understandable. So, and you had no introduction, but it was good because you did talk about the 2 types of products. So it was at your own way, but it was really nice. Wouldn't change anything really. Well done. Okay, guys, and that was a hard one to be honest. But let's see, let's continue. I want to do something different now. Okay, let's hear this one here.
Listen to a part of a lecture from a history class. The professor is talking about the Industrial Revolution.
Back in the 18th century, in a time known as the Industrial Revolution, some countries, well, England in particular, started using new technology, like steam-powered machines, to produce goods. And the use of these machines brought about some significant changes. Let's go over 2 main changes that occurred. One change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories. Let's take fabric or cloth as an example. Historically, for a very long time, people had made cloth by hand in their homes, earning a little money from their home-based cloth production. But then these new steam-powered machines for weaving cloth were invented and placed in factories, and these machines could weave cloth much more quickly and efficiently. So there wasn't any reason to keep making cloth slowly in homes when it could be made faster on factory machines. Thus, the majority of cloth production shifted from home-based businesses to factory production. Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories. Like, let's say there was a cloth factory that was built in a certain small village. Now, of course, the factory needed workers to operate the machines used in cloth production. So the factory would hire a lot of rural workers who would then move from the countryside to the village. So instead of being spread out all over the countryside, the workers started to congregate in the village with the factory. As a result, the village got bigger and bigger and eventually grew into a city.
Okay, guys. Now, using points and examples from the talk, describe 2 changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. And you will have 20 seconds now to prepare your response. Okay, guys, so maybe Dario?
Okay, teacher, I can try.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the lecture discusses about industrial revolution. First, the professor explains about how England changed, which is about 2 topics. The first one is about how industrial revolution has changed the way that they used to make some products in homes and move it to factories. The example that gives the lecture is that they make clocks in homes and then they move it to do it faster in factories. And then he goes about the second subtopic that explains about how cities were building around the same factories.
Very nice. So maybe, Dario, what I would say is save time in the introduction, right? The main topic is what you have in the question. Okay, the two changes, right? Those are the main ideas that you have to start explaining as soon as you can. So your intro shouldn't be longer than 10 seconds. I mean, you can talk about the Industrial Revolution and so forth, but it's not necessary, right? So you just say, the lecture talks about the two changes after the Industrial Revolution, for example. And then you go right off to the first one. So the first change, or the professor explains that one change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories, right? Which is what you said, but you said it later in the response, and then you didn't have too much time to explain. Try to start sooner with the two subtopics, which is always going to be the most important part. Okay, start sooner with subtopics. And that's the only thing I take. Okay, try yourself to say. Okay, guys. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, let's do another one.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Birds have some of the best vision capabilities in the animal kingdom. Some bird species have vision that is 8 to 10 times greater than humans. Overall, a bird's eyes are extremely important for its survival. One aspect of birds' eyes that plays a role in helping them survive, in other words, to find food or to avoid predators, is the position of the eyes in the skull. Some birds have eyes that face forward on the skull, kind of similar to how humans' eyes are positioned. Forward-facing eyes allow a bird to clearly see and judge distances because it can focus on objects with both of its eyes and correctly perceive height, width, and depth. One type of bird with eyes positioned in the front of the skull is the hawk. Hawks eat animals like mice. Hawks have such good eyesight that they can spot a tiny mouse in a field from high up in the air. They spot the mouse and swoop down to catch it. Without such good eyesight, they would not be able to spot or catch their food. Other birds have eyes that are located on each side of the skull. This positioning of the eyes can help a bird to avoid predators. Instead of just seeing what's directly in front, they can see things that are on either side, permitting them to watch for danger in all directions. Imagine a duck wading near the edge of a lake. It needs to spend time eating grasses and insects, but it also is on constant lookout for danger from its predator, like the fox. An eye on each side of the duck's head allows it to see a fox approaching from either side. If it spots a fox, it can then fly away to safety. The placement of the eyes are critical in helping the duck avoid predators.
Now, using the examples in the lecture, explain how the position of bird's eyes is critical to their survival. And you will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So maybe, well, who wants to go?
Me.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. The lecture discusses the position of birds' eyes is critical to their survival. First, the professor explained birds with forward eye, which is when a bird has the eyes in the front of the skull, and this is used to judge the distance. For instance, the professor gives the example of the hawk, which use in their eyes to look for a prey. Then she explains, well, then she goes on to explain birds with which eyes in each side, which use to avoid predators like the duck, for example.
Okay, well done, Sophia. So I know that you wanted to continue explaining probably, right? But I mean, I think it was a great answer. Both, I mean, everything was perfect in terms of content. Grammar was better as well. Now you conjugated correctly the verbs. So the only tip I can give you is make sure that you learn to stop yourself, right? So for example, in the first one, you have the correct topic. You said, so the professor explains that some birds have eyes positioned in the front of the skull. And then you explain why it's useful, right? So how it's useful for survival. So you said this allows them to judge distance. And then you said the professor gives the example of the hole, right? Which one did you say? Yes,
The hook.
exactly. So when you gave the example, you have 25 seconds left, enough for the other one. So you have to be constantly looking at the timer and see how much time you have left. If you have 25 seconds left, then it's time for you to stop yourself. Even if you didn't get to explain, like, the fact that the hawk is trying to catch the mice, for example, right? So even if that detail wasn't mentioned, you gotta stop yourself and move on to the next one, right? It's okay if you just say the professor gives the example of the hawk without explaining anything else. Okay, so
Okay.
just make sure that they're constantly looking at the timer so that your response is a little bit more balanced. And you don't risk running out of time. It was good. Let's do another one. Here.
Now listen to part of a talk in a psychology class.
Okay, ever thought about the things that happen to you and what's responsible for them? We psychologists have a term, locus of control. Locus of control refers to where people think control over their lives comes from, whether it comes from themselves or from somewhere else. People who think that control is in themselves are internals, and people who think it comes from somewhere else are externals. Let's say there are two people going for job interviews. One of them is an internal. She has an internal locus of control. Since she thinks that control comes from within herself, she'll believe that her success and her preparation are really her responsibility. So she's likely to really work on her interview skills ahead of time. Then, if she gets the job, she'll believe that it's because she's worked so hard. And if she doesn't get it, well, she'll probably be disappointed with herself and try to figure out how she can improve for the next time. Okay. And another job candidate is an external. He perceives other things, say his interviewers, to have more influence. After all, it's their decision. It depends on what mood they're in and, luck. Now, with his external locus of control, he's not as hard on himself, so he's more likely to take risks. He might interview for a job that he's not completely qualified for, and if he gets it, he'll think he's really lucky, and because he believes external forces are in control, he might think it's because the interviewers were having a good day. And if he doesn't get it, he'll probably blame the interviewers, or bad luck, rather than look at himself and try to figure out what he could have done better.
Now, using points and examples from the talk, explain internal and external locus of control. And now you will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So who else wants to try? Nobody wants to do this one? I choose.
Can I try?
Yeah, sure, Hunter. So go ahead, please.
The lecture discusses internal and external locus of control. In this case, the professor uses, in order to explain this, two examples of two job candidates' experience. Firstly, the professor explained internal locus of control, talking about a candidate that she believes that the success of getting the job is for herself. It means that if she's ready and she had all the preparation, she will get it. Then she goes on to explain the external locus of control, and for instance, she talks about the following candidate who thinks that the interviewer's decisions are the more relevant.
Okay, good. So just time, right? In your introduction, you gotta save some time. I like your idea of, I mean, you took the tip that I gave you, you're using the example to explain the concept. You didn't explain the definition. You're using the example, but try to summarize it a little bit more. So the professor gives the example of two job candidates. The internal one will believe that whatever happens, or whether she or gets the job or not, will be her fault, her preparation. Leave it there, right? On the other hand, the external person will believe that if he gets the job or not, it depends on the on luck or on the interviewer's mood, external factors, right? Try to summarize maybe a little bit more. It's just a matter of practice, summarizing information, but you got the idea.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Any questions so far? Let's see. Okay, let's do something different.
So we're talking about interior design, specifically the basic principles typically used in home and office decoration in the United States. Effective designs create a delicate balance between two things. You need unity, and you also need contrast, which is essentially a break in unity. Now, this might seem a little contradictory, but let me explain why we need both of these for an effective design. So for the first principle, we need unity in our design. Think of it as consistency. Well, an easy and very effective way to do this is by bringing together similar elements. A common example is by matching colors. You pick a color and use it for different parts of the room. Say you pick green, and then use a light shade of green for the walls and maybe a somewhat darker shade for the fabric on the sofa, and finally complement that with a matching green in the rug. When elements match, the room is unified and gives its residents a sense of order and comfort. Okay, but there is such a thing as too much unity. Remember, you need a balance of unity and contrast. If all you do is focus on unity, the result will be a boring room. So what do? Well, you apply the second basic principle of design, which is contrast. Contrast serves to disrupt or break up the unity in places, but in a careful, intentional way. Well, let's continue using color as an example. To create contrast, color contrast, you need to abruptly change your color scheme once in a while. Let's see. You could throw bright red cushions on your dark green sofa, for example. Contrast makes things stand out. The green will look even greener next to the red. So now your room is more interesting, not completely the same. But watch out. Too much contrast is also dangerous, just like too much sameness is. Too much contrast will make the room feel busy.
Now, using the points and examples from the lecture, explain what unity and contrast are and how they make interior design more effective. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So is there anyone who wants to go now?
Let me try, Andrea.
Okay, perfect. So go ahead, please.
The lecture discusses about the two basic principles in interior design, unity and contrast. The first principle is about for example, matching colors. When the professor refers about when you pick some colors like green and they use light shade green, for example. And the other principle is contrast, which is the way you change the, for example, boring room when you use unity only. You have to, this principle is about break up some unity in places. In conclusion, there always has to be a balance between unity and contrast.
Okay, good. I like that conclusion because it is answering the question about right? So how they make interior design more effective when combined. And well done. I mean, you explained both of them, what unity and contrast are. So matching colors, creating some sense of, well, unity and disrupting that unity, right, with contrast. Now, you did explain the first example, a little bit about the colors, right? Combining different shades of green, but maybe try to be a bit more specific. And also don't forget the second example as well, right? So in this case, I think they were talking about a room where you have green walls and maybe you can have a green sofa with green cushions and maybe place something red in between. Don't forget the examples. But it was a great response.
Okay.
Always make sure that you're paying attention for those elements, right? To subtopics, to examples, always the most important. It was good though. So what do you guys think now that we've practiced question 4? What do you think about this question? I mean, we've done all of the speaking questions now, no? So what do you think about them? How are you feeling about these questions?
I personally think that it is the easiest.
You think this is the easiest one?
Yeah.
Really? Easier than task 1, for example, or 2?
Yes, because you just have to summarize and you have the words, you have the text. So for me, it is simpler.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would personally say that it is the simplest one compared to all of the integrated questions, right? Because task 2 and 3, you have to kind of somehow connect the ideas between the reading and the listening, right? And so in this case, as you're saying, you're just supposed to summarize, and you do have a lot of help from your question. So yeah, that's true. What else? What else do you guys think? Okay, so just keep practicing. Make sure that you continue using the template until you get to the point where you've memorized the structure, right? Where you know that you have to have an intro, 10 seconds, mention the two subtopics, two examples, and use those elements, right? Like transitions, reporting verbs. You'll get to a point where you just remember the structure and you don't need to be reading or following the template. It's just a matter of practice. And also make sure that you know which question, you know how the different questions are, right? And which one is task 1, task 2, task 3, and you're able to identify them by the numbers as well to practice. So no questions really before we go? Everything's clear? All right, guys, so please don't forget today's survey. And I will be seeing you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.